So starting with contracts, DGS terminology, what I wanted to do here was tell those of you that are new the terminology DGS uses. What is a contract? So we have task orders, we have contracts, we have purchase order agreements, we have letter contracts. Any of those is considered a contract for the purpose of project team. Whatever the initial signed authorization for your contractor to work is, the base contract, all of that is your contract.
Hey, John,
okay.
John, the page you're showing is your welcome back, John page. Is that the one you intend to display?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah, the agenda, if you didn't hear me, the agenda was sent out in as an attachment to the invitation to the meeting. So you can download it and follow along there. As I get into project team, I'll be moving around and I'll be showing you guys in project team. So I have that up and ready to go. But thank you. Okay, so that was the purpose of that DGS terminology, is just to let you guys know that all of those things are contracts for the purposes of project team. So that's what you should be putting in as your contract. So like I said, that initial document, whether it's a letter contract or a task order, whatever that first one is. So we have the contracts form within your project. So once you open your project, when your contract is issued by Contracts and Procurement, you will need to come into project team and you will need to input your contract. That is a PM thing. So you'd come in here, you would hit this new button under contracts. You would pick the type. It's always going to be a contract for DGS. We're not general contractors, so we don't use subcontract. Give it a title. Make sure that your title has meaning. It's not just the PO number. It's not the vendor's name. You know, if this is construction services, you could put Smith Construction Services, or Smith Construction Letter Contract, and then a PO number. You know, something that's descriptive of what it is, and then the PO number. So again, this is the base contract or original issuance PO number. So we will explain as we go through this what to do when you have multiple POs awarded with the contract. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in like you would for entering a contract. I won't do this with everything because we do have a lot, but just to give you an example, and then PO, whatever it is. We're not using unit price contracts, so don't ever worry about that. That's for more facilities type stuff. So once you do that, it sets everything up, and you go through, and if there's if it's a task order, get the task order number. You really will need to read your contract in order to fill this out to make sure that you get anything. If it doesn't have a task order number, it's not a task order. Don't worry about that. Contract number, that'll be spelled out. It's usually DCAM dash whatever fiscal year it is, and a bunch of other stuff. Enter the contract number. That's not the PO number. If not all contracts have a contract number. So you can leave that blank if there isn't a contract number. Select your vendor. If they've been added in the directory, they'll show up here. If they are not added in the directory, you can type. You don't have to pick from this list of names. If you have a joint venture, you're going to have added both companies individually because they have different email addresses, but you can type the name of the joint venture as it is the legal entity, and you can put that here even if it's not showing up in your list. Then you're going to, put your contact person for the contract, what role they serve on the contract. You're going to select this from the list. So whatever, if they're the architect, the general contractor, the owner's rep, CM, whatever they are. What type of contract is it? Is it a letter contract? Is it a task order? Was it a regular basic contract? Is it a POA? Select. If they're, pick the market that it went out. If it was a set aside, if it was a small purchase, sole source, IDIQ, open IFB or RFP. And then scope of work. This can be as little or as much as you want to put. The basic thing I say is, cut and paste at least the summary paragraph of the scope of work out of the contract itself. You can literally open up that that PDF document, highlight that and drag it over here. So you don't have to retype it. So the executed date, this is always the date that the contracting officer signed the contract. Okay, it's not the date at the top. It's not the date the PO was issued. It's when the contracting officer signed it. You'll always see a date right next to their name in the signature part for them. That's the date you want to put here. NTP date, this may be listed as a separate date in the contract. It may be something else, or if it's not listed, it's the same date as the executed date, if it's ambiguous. Contract completion date. So this is one that a lot of people are struggling with. This is the final contract completion date. This isn't your substantial completion date. It's not your administrative term date. It's the actual contract completion date. You may need to read through your contract. I've seen a lot of contracts that have a substantial completion date listed, but don't call out the final completion date. Read your contract, see if it has a specific term for closeout period. If it does have a specific closeout period date or term, then you would add those days to the substantial completion date to determine your contract completion date. Okay, so you have to figure out what your contract says and utilize that to get the right contract completion date. This is the date that's going to update via change order. Okay, so that's why this one has original. Revised contract completion date is going to show if and when there's a change order that increases the contract completion date. We'll talk a little more about that with change orders. Substantial completion date, this is the date that's called out for substantial completion in the contract. So again, you got to read it. This date is set by the contract. Any revisions to this date will be done at the change order level. So this is recording what's issued with that contract. Okay. Same with the administrative term date. If you don't have an administrative term date, you can leave this blank. But if there's one listed in the contract and spelled out, you're going to want to enter that here. CB participation, pick the contractual requirement. Is it 3550 or is it not applicable? Reach out to support if for some reason you have a different level than one of those three. We haven't seen one yet, but things can happen. Your general retainage percent. You can either type numbers or you can use these little arrows over here to go up and down, whatever, 10%, 5%, whatever it is for that contract. If you have multiple retainage percentages, just put the biggest of them. It's not going to necessarily carry over. If you have a different material retainage percent, put the different rate here. If it's the same as general or ambiguous, make them the same. Again, we're not using unit price contract, so you don't need to do anything with that. All right. The next one is the schedule of values. So this is important for you to also pay attention to how your contract is structured. The general basic rule for everything is match the purchase order. If the purchase order has 3 lines, your schedule of values in here should have the same 3 lines. Okay. Some nuances to that you guys need to be aware of is sometimes you have a contract where there are reimbursables. Okay. You may have 1 line on your purchase order and that has a 5 or a 10% retainage on it, but you also have reimbursables that do not have retainage. In order to bill those correctly with the retainage percentages correct, you will need to split those out in your schedule of values. So you will need to put the retainage as a separate line. So you can create as many new lines in here as you want. Just make this match what you need for, or your vendors will need to properly invoice their contract. Okay, if you have questions about how to handle something, again, reach out to us at support. We'll help you get it in there how you need it. But it's usually pretty simple. Just if they're gonna need to split their schedule of values out for the invoice cover sheet to 3 lines, make sure you've got those 3 lines in here. Okay. Original contract value. This is going to be what the original value was, and then any change orders are going to populate this. It's going to give you the total of these 2 summed together if that changes. And then it's going to tell you how many days have been added via change order here. These are all calculated fields through the system that you're not going to have to worry about. So if you ever have a question, something's not working right, your contract doesn't have the right end date, something like that, come back here and take a look. See if this all has the right info. If it doesn't, that means the system doesn't have your change orders correctly. You're missing an additional value, or you're missing some additional days. If it's a date that's off, you can quickly check right here and get all your info, and then you can go back to your change orders and figure out if you need to make some edits or you're missing one or something like that. Okay, so again, you're just recording what was issued with the contract. That's all you're doing here. You're not, this is already issued by the contracting officer. You're just capturing it in the system for use. All right, if you want to go add the drawings, if your drawings are in here and your contract is based on the permit set or 95% drawing submission, something like that, you can link right to that submission out of the system so that it shows this contract was based on these drawings. Same thing with specifications. It was based on these specs. If you have includes, excludes, alternates, you can list those here. Contract exhibits, you can put those in the system and it shows you which exhibits. So if you want to go into contract exhibits, you can create new or add existing, put your RFP in there, put your attachments in there, or whatever you want. And then as change orders are added, you'll be able to click on the change orders. So if you see that something's missing here, you can quickly go to this change orders tab and see the basic information. This is how many days have been added by each change order. Okay, so this is kind of just a history of the changes to this contract. All right, so make sure when you're putting this stuff in that the data has value. Putting just the PO number as the title of this contract doesn't add any value. It doesn't tell anybody that's the general contractor's construction contract or letter contract. All right, it doesn't say that this is the industrial hygienist's contract or which company it is right off the top. So make the title count, make all of these count. Pay attention to what you're putting in there. Put the, the basic scope of work. If it's easy for you to cut and paste the whole thing and you get the full scope in there, it's not a novel, go ahead and do it. But if not, even just chunks, we're going to renovate this facility to include new HVAC systems, finishes, bathroom renovations, ADA compliance upgrades, that kind of thing. Just make it make sense and make the data have some quality to it, because we are reporting on these. You can search on this, you can filter on things, and somebody may take over your project later on, or there may be an audit, there may be a claim. So having the information there so people can find it is very helpful. I kind of skipped ahead with dates. We talked about that, what the dates are in here. So we've already covered that. So once you're done, you're going to hit save and share. You're going to share it with the project manager. Always share it with project manager share group. This will trigger the auto share and allow all these other DGS share groups, they'll automatically see it. So you don't have to go in here and go, okay, I got to make sure finance sees this. I got to make sure the EPM can see it. It's all automatic. Just share it with the project manager share group. It does not auto share with vendors. So if this is the general contractor's contract, you're going to want to share it with the general contractor. If it's the architect, you're going to want to share it with the architect. Now, this is a financial document. You don't necessarily want other vendors to see it. Okay, sometimes you do. Your architect may need to see your general contractor's contract so that they can see what's involved in the contract to be able to review it. But the general contractor generally doesn't need to see the architect's contract. Okay, so be cognizant of that. One of the nuances to that, so you would always add the project manager share group, that covers DGS, but then anything outside of that, you'll have to pick yourself. So pay attention to who needs to see it. Sometimes it can be multiple groups depending on the record, but contracts are usually one group. But if you have more than one general contractor on the project for some reason, or more than one architect engineer, you can skip the share group for financial documents only. And you can go down, you'll see that there is a share group for each individual company. That is the only time you should use the company share group, is when you need to send a financial document and there are multiple users or multiple vendors of the same type in a share group. Everything else you should be using share groups. You should pretty much never be using these names down here individually. Okay, you need to use the share groups. So once you've shared that, I'm not going to save this because I don't have it all filled out. Once you've done that, it's going to open up the actual contract, and you're going to see it, and you're going to have your attachments down here. Make sure you put a copy of that signed contract and a copy of that change order, or sorry, not change order, PO in here for that, or anything else that needs to be attached. Any include, exclude matrix, any, anything. It should all be in here. So if I'm taking over a project as the PM from somebody, I should be able to come in here, see all the info I need on the contract, and then go down here and actually have a copy of the contract and the PO available right within that contract. Okay, and that's the same. It works for all the forms. The next one is GMP short funded and multiple PO contracts. So as I was saying in the beginning, your contract is going to be whatever that first vehicle to award to that vendor is. So if you have a letter contract, that's going to be your contract. If you have a POA that gets added late, some things get added later, the POA is your contract. Everything else needs to be handled as a change order. The same goes, excuse me, with multiple PO contracts. All right. If you get awarded, if your vendor gets awarded a contract and it's split between two POs, because let's say there's capital funds and operating funds on the same contract, and in the initial award, you get two POs. Enter the contract and take the lowest numbered PO, because usually they're consecutive numbers. That's your contract. The second PO is going to be a change. Okay, the system needs to do that in order to capture those PO numbers for reporting purposes, because you can only have one PO number assigned to this to each contract and to each change order. All right, so keep that in mind. If you have two POs on a contract, second one is going to be a change to the first one. So you would enter this contract, you would then go and enter the change order. You do not need to have a PCO in the system for that second PO. Okay, that's the one time you don't need a PCO for the change order, because it's just an administrative function. We covered sharing when I went through the saving. So the other thing is approval. Now, everybody's seen this blue approval button on the contracts. You can approve your contracts if you want, but you don't have to. So this, originally we said don't approve them because we couldn't approve them. We have the ability to unapprove them now. So you can approve this. What it does is that locks the record. You can't make any edits without unapproving it. Okay, so that's what the approval on the contract does. So it's up to you whether you want to approve them or not. It's kind of a personal choice. It's not a requirement. But this is a change from when we first project team, so I wanted to let you guys know you can approve these without having any detrimental effects if you want. If you do choose to approve them, you'll notice when you hit that button, the first thing that comes up is a date. It asks you for a date. Okay? You as the PM do not have the ability to approve a contract, period. That's the contracting officer. So keep that in mind when you're approving. This approved date is not the date that you're pushing the button in the system. It's the date that the contract was approved. So it's this same executed date. All right, so if this contract, I didn't enter it because it's a test, but if this executed date was 12/1/2020, when I hit approve contract, the date that I'm going to put in here is 12/1/2020. It should match. Okay. The other thing is, if you start typing a date, it's going to pull up the calendar. You must select the date from the calendar. Even if I type this exactly, I still have to select it here. Okay, and then I hit yes. For those of you that haven't seen this, you do not have to go month by month through here. If you need to go to 2023 or back to 2019 or something, you can hit that at the top and go through years individually and then select the month. Okay, so that works with any of the calendar functions. Okay, and then the last thing showing.
John.
Yes.
By mistake, I approve a contract. How can I unapprove it?
If you have an approved contract, open it up and go to this ellipsis button here, the three dots, and you'll see an unapprove option.
Oh, okay.
You just click unapprove and it'll unapprove it.
Okay, thank
There are some nuances to that. So if you come in here and it's approved and you don't see unapproved, look and see if there's another contract for the same vendor. Usually it's not the case with contracts, it's the case with change orders. But for some reason you don't see unapproved, see if there's something later that's approved. Or if this has change orders and payment applications against it, you may have to go unapprove those first before you'll see the unapprove here. But the unapprove will always be under this ellipse button. There just may be conditions for it to show up. So reach out to support if you can't find it and need help.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, John, I got a quick question about the contracts.
Mhm.
So we've got a project that has multiple funding sources, capital and local funds, but it has 3 different contract numbers to them, all issued at different times of the life cycle of the project.
3 different contract numbers or 3 different funding project numbers?
3 different funding sources and 3 different contract numbers.
Okay, if it's 3 different contract numbers, you would have to enter them as 3 different contracts.
I just want to confirm that. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. So the last thing under contracts is the QRG. I put a link right in the agenda for the QRG for contracts for DGS users. So there's a link directly to it for you guys. Any other questions on contracts before I go on? Okay, great. If you think of anything later on, reach out to project team, dgs.projectteam@dc.gov. So potential change orders, that's the next item on our list, because taking payment applications out of the mix, because that'll be its own part at the end. Potential change order is the next logical step in the contract change order process. So anytime there is the potential for a change to time, cost, or scope, your vendor needs to enter it as a potential change order in the system. This is prior to the change order being issued. This is prior to you requesting the change order from procurement. The potential change order is the notification from the vendor to the PM that they feel that they are due a change to time, cost, or scope. So this should not, the only time you should be telling them to put a PCO in is when they come to you outside of the system and say, hey, I think I'm due more money. Tell them to put it in as a potential change order. It should not be something they have to go back and do after the change order has been awarded. So this is the official notification. So your vendor, they have their, QRG on how to do it. So you're reviewing and approving. But they're going to enter this. There's a workflow for them that they're going to send it over to you, and you're going to review it from there. So I'm not going to go into how to do it because that's a vendor thing, but we will go in here. This, you should be getting a notification in your email that says a PCO has been sent to you via workflow. You'll have a button to click on that'll take you in here and open this right up. You'll see up at the top, it says take action. There's a workflow. You're not going to do anything with that until after you've reviewed it and made a determination. So that take action can sit up there till the process is done. It's just alerting you that there is an action to be taken at some point. Okay. So you're going to go through, you're going to read all the fields, make sure it has a title that applies to what it is. Again, the data integrity, the data quality. Don't just approve time extension. That's not it's not telling you anything. Time extension due to unforeseen conditions, time extension due to UST found on site, something like that makes sense. Just the words time extension doesn't. The PCO date is the date they're creating this and sending it to you. Okay, so they shouldn't be going in and putting it back 6 months from now, future. It should be the date that they're doing it. So description of potential change, we found a UST on the site, and this will, cause issues and cost us an additional time, scope of work, determine requirements for removal of UST, remove the UST, replace with soils, whatever it is. So description of potential change and scope are different things. This is what it is, and this is what it's going to take to do what's covered under this PCO. Okay. The reason, this is a drop-down list. They must select the reason. When you're reviewing, you need to make sure that the reason makes sense. That is the correct reason. If it's not, don't approve it. Tell them to change it. You know, this is an official submission from your vendor. Your vendor needs to make it correct before you approve it. So that's something that applies throughout project team. Anything that comes from your vendor, that's official. Make them fix it. Don't go in here and edit it. Okay. Justification, you know, why this isn't covered in the contract, why it isn't already there, why it can't be reasonably inferred from the contract documents. You know, what is it that's making it more expensive, more time consuming, whatever it is. From business, you know, when they do this, it's going to populate with from business. They're going to enter their proposed cost. They're going to enter their proposed schedule impact. You're going to, at the end, if you acknowledge this and say, yep, it's going to be turned into a change order, whatever you've negotiated is the acknowledged cost. So they can propose $50 million and you can come back and say, I'm going to give you $1.87. All right. You can say acknowledge schedule impact. You say it's going to be 500 days. I've negotiated it. I'm going to give you 10. Whatever that is. If you agree to the 50 million and whatever they put here, then that's what you enter here. But these do not have to match. The acknowledged cost is what's going to carry over into the change order. Okay, so this is the step to get that into the change order. Is you need to come back once you've gone through the whole PCO review and approval acknowledgement process. We don't use the word approval, so none of the vendors think that they're approved to do the work. It's acknowledged. Whatever you put here is going to carry over to the change order. They can request a revised substantial completion date. They can request a revised final completion date. The change order is going to either agree to this or not, and you'll capture the revision at the change order level. So you'll also see there's a location space where they can tell you this is on the 3rd floor in room A619 or whatever. They can reference a drawing that's in the system. They can reference the specifications that are in the system. They can reference a directive if you issued a directive to them in the system. And then there's their cost breakdown. So you can work with the vendor if you're okay with one line item for this whole PCO. Let them put one line item in. If you want it broken out, there's 3 different pieces to this. You want it broken out into 3 different lines, have them break it out into 3 different lines. You would acknowledge the cost the same way. All right. Early on in project team, when we were first doing this, they could put 50 lines in here. And when you moved it to a change order, it would all consolidate into one line. That is no longer the case. You are given the option at this point to keep it split and move all the lines over individually, or you can roll them all up into one line and have that go over. It gives you the choice when you create the change order. So we'll see that here shortly. Okay, these fields down here are for your use as the project manager. What is your determination on entitlement? Yes, no, you know, whatever you need to put. The vendor can see this when you type in it. They can also see the status. This is a drop down. If you're reviewing it, change it to in review. If it's acknowledged, change it to acknowledged. If it's rejected, change it to rejected. The vendor can also see that. These fields down here, the vendor cannot see. So when you enter your IGE cost, they're not going to see that field. Excuse me. Your internal review comments, they're not going to see that. That's going to just be seen through your team and DGS. Funding source, if you enter that, funding notes, budget line item, any of that stuff, they're not going to see it. They are going to see the contract reference. And then once you turn this into a change order, if say this becomes change order 4, it's going to show that reference down here and you'll be able to click on it once you turn it into a change order. So if you're coming back and looking through PCOs and you're going, I know I processed this, which change order was it? You no longer have to, you know, apparently it wants to run AutoCAD. Sorry about that. As soon as it comes up, I'll close it. But you'll be able to see which change order it's actually this PCO is part of, and you'll be able to click on it right here. Again, you're also going to have attachments. Your vendor should have attached a copy of their proposal. They should have attached any supporting documentation you need, any of that stuff in the attachment section, so you'd be able to pull it up. And so All right, so that's where you'll find all that. And again, this should have been workflowed to you by the vendor. And then once you take action on the workflow, after you've acknowledged it, if you are rejecting it, just status it as rejected, put the reason why, and then cancel the workflow. It'll stop it. It doesn't go any further. It's rejected. If you're going to acknowledge it, it's going to become a change order. You're going to go in your workflow, you're going to pass it. And then once you pass it and give the notes that you acknowledge it, it's going to go forward to your EPM for their sign off. Once they pass it, if they hit pass, then it's approved. If they hit cancel, then it's canceled. At this point, you take all of this information, and this is what becomes the basis for your change order request in Salesforce to procurement. So you have all your files and supporting documentation here that you need. You can do a quick print up here, and you can print out a copy of this whole PCO out of here and include it as a PDF. Everything's here for you to go get your potential change or your change order created. All right. Anybody have any questions on the PCO process?
Don, what do you do if your proposed change order is paid out of your owner-directed allowances?
It's not a potential change order if it's coming from contingency or allowances. That would be a contingency draw request. So if your vendor has put it in as a PCO and it should have been out of contingency or allowance, whichever one you want to call them, they act as the same thing, then you would reject the PCO and tell them to put in a contingency draw request.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to change orders? Okay, I did throw the QRGs in there, both the vendor version link and the DGS version link. You guys feel free to look at the vendor version because then you know what you should be seeing here. That can help. That's why it's in there. Yep.
Did this PCO have an attachment? I forgot to check on that.
No, no, this is just a test PCO, so no attachment in it.
Because from when I've converted from PCO to a change order, the attachment that's part of the PCO, from what I remember, does not transition once it gets into a change order. So then I have to reattach it. Is that how it's supposed to be?
Yes, that's how it's supposed to be because those attachments apply to the PCO, not necessarily to the change order. They're in support of the PCO. The change order itself is going to have the awarded change order and the PO that go to the change order.
Okay, so the PCO attachments is what the vendor is proposing, and then we print this out, we submit it through Salesforce, and then it goes through a week or two through the procurement team, and then we change it from a PCO on project team to a change order when we get the mod.
Correct.
And then we attach a mod to the change order. Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
Thanks.
No problem. So that's a. Go ahead.
Sorry, quick question. Going back to the last before Karen's last question, contingency is supposed to be part of your schedule of values, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
I set mine up. It's just a line item that I carry on the SOV, and if we approve for the vendor to bill against that, then it will be on their next invoice, and it will be progressed accordingly. If not, if we finish the job and it's not touched, then they don't get to bill, especially if it's owner controlled.
Yes, and that's a good point, and you are correct, and that's a good way to set it up. If you have contingency awarded within the contract or an allowance or anything else like that, yes, when you structure that contract schedule of values, or if the contingency changes in the change order, that should be a separate line. That's a good way to keep track of it and make sure that the monies that are used out of contingency are billed against the contingency. That is a good point. All right, anything else on PCOs? Okay, so we're gonna take one step in between PCO and change orders here, because sometimes you will get a BCD or basic change directive. So if procurement once you've done the PCO process and you've put in the procurement request and that process is going on, if procurement decides to issue a basic change directive, you would just come in here in the system and you're just going to capture it. Okay? Because this is an interim step, you know, we need a copy of it, but it's not going to affect the finances or anything like that, because that's all going to change once this BCD becomes an actual change order or modification. Okay? So if you get a BCD, come in, give it the subject that should be the same subject as the BCD usually, but make sure it's descriptive. If you need to add the contractor's name or something like that, or a better description, go ahead and do that here. You can either get next on the number or type in the number, either one. Make it match the BCD. Put in the date that the contracting officer signed it. Again, the date issued or date approved, they're always date executed. All of those mean the date the contracting officer signed it. If there's an NTE amount, which I believe almost all, if not all, BCDs have an NTE amount, not to exceed amount right now, enter that amount. If it should be associated with the PCO, so you can come in here and select the PCO that caused this BCD to be issued, just so there's a link to it, so it's tracked. Put any notes or comments, and then save and share with again, the project manager share group and the share group for the vendor that the BCD is for. And then you'll get the attachment section. You just put an attachment, attach a copy of the BCD itself to that. So this is literally just recording that a BCD was issued and getting the information and a copy of it in the system. So this one's real simple. Contracts and procurement doesn't issue a lot of BCDs, so this isn't super common, but it does happen. Any questions on BCDs? Okay. So back to the potential change order. So now you've gone through the BCD if you've got one, you've gone through the PCO process. Contracts and procurement has issued you a change order. Okay, we're going back to the terminology here. So change order, modification, mod, all of those are change orders for the sake of the system. They all fall under change orders. They all mean the same thing. Additionally, as talked about with the contracts, if you're getting supplemental funding POs for your contract, or you're getting the definitized contract, the target GMP, the early release package, all of those are going to be done as change orders to that base or letter contract as well. Okay, so anytime you get a new PO, that's a change order. That's the way the system has to handle it. Again, each PO is a specific record. You have to make sure that each time there's a PO, it goes in its own record. All right. So we're going to say we've sent that PCO over. It's been awarded as a change order or modification by contracts and procurement. You've got a copy of the PO. You've got a copy of the signed change order. So then you're going to come back in here in your PCOs. You're going to open up that PO that you were using. Okay, this is the one I pulled everything out. I put it in the procurement system. You're going to hit edit. You're going to come back here. You're going to enter the acknowledged costs. If you haven't done that already, you're going to enter the acknowledged schedule impact if you haven't done that already. And then you're going to hit save. And then you're going to hit this create change order button. What that's going to do, and this is where you get that choice, do you want to keep it all as separate cost line items, or do you want to summarize all of them into one line item? That's your choice. If you need to break it out, keep it all as separate line items. If it's just one line to begin with, it doesn't matter, just select either. But that's going to generate this. Okay, so now we've got a change order that's linked in the system to both the contract and the PCO. Make sure the number's right, make sure the title is right. Date issued, this is again, date the contracting officer signed it. So if they signed it today, put today's date. If they signed it a week ago, put a week ago. Description of the change. You can usually cut and paste that right out of the change order, the modification that's signed. There's a description. Category. This is very important that you select the category that the change order applies to. In Prologue, this all came from the PCO. Here, it's directly for this change order. So administrative or correction, these are those change orders where they have awarded to the wrong vendor. They have fixed something. They're just correcting an administrative thing. Okay. Definitized contract or GMP, that's self-explanatory. DGS request, this is we have asked the vendor to provide additional work. This also counts for the client agency. We act on the client agency's behalf. So if your client says, hey, I want you to add in a fence around the athletic field, okay, that's a DGS request. We're requesting it on behalf of the client agency. Early release agreement, those of you with GMPs know what that is. If that's the case, errors and omissions, if this change order is because there's a a problem with the design or was errors and omissions in the design, select that. Other should very rarely be used. It's only there if nothing else applies. Supplemental funding, this is what you're going to choose when you have those change orders that are just, 2 POs issued for the contract. That second PO that you have to do as a change order, that's just supplemental funding. Okay. So that's what that's for. If you're some of the administrative contracts for PM services, you may be, your contract may say that you have a full fiscal year of services, but they only give you a PO for the first 3 months. The second PO is a change order and it's just supplemental funding. You've already got a contract. Target GMP, if this modification is to do a target GMP, that's the reason. If it's just a time extension, that's all you're giving, that's what it is. And then unforeseen conditions, if the change order is due to that. Other captures anything else. So we use these when we're reporting and doing KPIs so that your project doesn't show a 5,000% change order process because you had a GMP. We will filter out things that aren't true changes using these categories. Okay, so they are very important. Contract reference is going to populate automatically. This contract executed date, we don't use this field that this actually pulls from in the system, so it'll always be blank in your change order. Just don't worry about it. It's a hidden field on the contracts. Change order type, it's always going to be contract because that's what you select at the contract level. It's always going to populate your business, your vendor. It's going to give you the original contract value, sum of any previously approved changes, and then the previous value, and then this value for the change order, and then what is your total value now? It's all going to show there. It's going to show you the original contract completion date, sum of previously approved changes, and then previous contract completion date. Right here is where you need to put in the calendar days added via that change order. Okay. Yes, we had them in the PCO on record for acknowledgement, but because you can pull multiple PCOs into a change order, not all of those dates are going to stack. So you have to say this change order has this many dates. That's the only way to deal with that. So this is what's going to change your contract completion date on your contract. So the days are the days between the current final completion and the new final completion. So if the change order just changes your substantial completion date, that's a milestone date. That's not a completion date. Okay, so your change order, if there's no extension of the contract, it's just a change of the substantial completion date, it's a 0-day change order. It's not a time extension. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is going to move the final completion date, and it is calendar days. All right, and then this is where you're going to record if the substantial completion date is changed in this change order, what's the new one? And if the administrative term is changed in that change order, what's the new one? You're going to capture them there. So these are not going to update the fields on the contract. That's by design. The contract notes what the original contract dates were for that, and the change orders note what the revised dates are from that change order. Okay, the only one that's going to update is this contract revised contract completion date. All right. So then once you get all of that in here, your change detail, this is going to pull over from your PCO. Okay, it's if you told it, if it had 6 lines and you told it to keep 6 lines, you'd see all 6 lines here. It's going to show you the acknowledged schedule impact for each of the lines. And if you added the account code or budget line item, it's going to put those in there. And then you're going to save and share. Okay. And again, you're going to save and share with the project manager share group and whichever vendor this change order applies to, their share group. So if it's GC, we're going to do that. All right. So we have a change order. We're going to now attach a copy of our PO and our signed change order right here. And anything else supporting documentation that you want to put in is going to be here. And now the change order is in the system. It's there. It's available. The last step on a change order is this is the one record you must approve for it to apply. Okay, so this change order can be all in here and all filled out. It's not going to apply against your contract until you approve it. It's not going to be available for payment applications unless you approve it. Again, just hit the button. Same thing as we talked about on the contract. You've got your date issued, the date the contracting officer signed the change order. That's right here. That's the date that you're going to pick for the approval date. Okay, that's the date that's going to make this change order valid in the payment application and the contract. So if your vendor, this one's approved 12/15/20, if your vendor is putting in a payment application in November, it's not going to apply this change order because it was not valid in November. Okay, so but these two must match. Most of the time when we get the support question about, hey, my vendor can't pull in this change order or my contract value is wrong, it's not pulling in the change order, it's because this date is not correct. Okay. Any questions on, oh, one more thing on change orders. If you need to add multiple PCOs to one change order, if you group them together, okay, before you approve it, you have to save it first because the record has to exist to link to other records. So that's a nuance in the system. So once you have the first change order pulled over, this is all created, it's all set up, hit edit, go to the change detail button or tab and just hit add PCO, and then you can select, I don't have any others on this contract, but you'll see a list of all the PCOs that apply to this contract. You can select all of them that apply to this change order and you can add them and it will pull them all in right here. Okay, so it is very easy to put multiple PCOs in one change order. And then you just hit save again. And then you'd approve it after that. So any questions on change orders? I know we have 11 minutes to do pay apps, so trying to keep this moving, but feel free to speak up. Okay, so payment applications, everybody's favorite. So your vendor is responsible for submitting a payment application, which is the pencil copy. It is not the invoice. Okay, they're responsible for submitting that prior to submitting an invoice to the DC vendor portal. They have to officially submit it to you via workflow. You have to go in and review and approve everything and then tell them when it's all agreed, just like the normal pencil copy process. Yep, we all agree on this. Go upload your actual invoice. Okay, because it's an official vendor submission, just like that PCO, you as the PM cannot make changes to what the vendor is submitting. If there are changes that need to be made, the vendor needs to do them. Okay. So make sure if PMO is telling you that this is wrong or this is incorrect, I get a number of support requests that say, hey, John, I can't update this field. You know, it won't let me. Yep, it won't let you because this is a vendor submission. The vendor has to do it. So that keep that in mind. There are clear-cut roles and responsibilities. Payment application, pencil copy versus invoice. Again, this is the pencil copy. Your payment application is the pencil copy. It is not the invoice. They have different requirements. They are different things. They are different records. So you are working as when you are dealing with the payment application prior to the invoice submission, you are just dealing with the pencil copy. So when you're reviewing this, you know, you need to make sure everything is correct. Make sure the title is correct. There is a naming nomenclature that's required. It's the I believe the vendor name, the invoice, vendor invoice number, and the amount needs to be in the title. Okay, the PO number is going to pull over automatically based on how you entered your contract. The number one support request we get is, why is my merge template not working? It's not showing the top fields, it's broken. It's not broken. Your vendor did not fill out this contract information section. Okay, all they have to do is they come in here, they hit add existing, and they pick their contract, and it fills out for them. But that is the number one issue with payment applications. So when you're reviewing this as the PM, if this is all blank and it just shows these headers, they haven't done their job. Their merge template's not going to work. Their invoice is not going to get processed when they submit it, and you need to send it back for them to do this. Okay? Administrative term date. This is the current administrative term date. This is manually entered by your vendor. This should match whatever the current administrative term date is for your contract via whatever is changed in change orders. So make sure that this is the correct administrative term date for your vendor's contract. This payment application PO numbers. These are the POs that are associated directly with this payment application and or invoice later on, because this will populate the merge template. So we see here that this is PO number 001. Okay, well, let's say I build out PO number 001 8 months ago, and I have 13 change orders that I'm now working off of with different PO numbers, and those are what I'm invoicing. Okay, it's done because of the way DGS does pay invoices. They're all done on one invoice, but your vendor needs to just put the POs that apply to this payment application and later to the invoice. Okay, so they don't need to repeat this. They just need to put the ones that apply. All right, they do need to include PO at the beginning. Please do not accept them with just the 6 digits. Okay, make sure it's PO and then the actual PO number. Make sure the payment application number is correct. Sequence number, this is going to show you, if this is sequence 25 and payment application 8, you're going to know that they've put in a whole bunch of extra ones that were wrong. Okay, this is auto-populated, so you can't change it. But if you're looking at payment application 8 and you see sequence 10, you know there was something else done. Can help you. This is the date that they are sending the application to you. Okay, this is also the date that's going to apply for that change order. All right, so if this is the 14th, that change order we just entered for the 15th is not going to apply. Cost period, you guys, we went over how to do this in setup. Whatever cost periods you put in setup are going to be available for the vendor to select from here in the pay app. Okay, cost period should be like this. They should be 1 month from the first day to the last day. There should be one for every month that's there. Billing period start, billing period end. These are pretty self-explanatory. Make sure they're within the contract period. Vendor invoice number, they know what that is. They put that in. This date is added later. This is the date that they are actually going to submit the invoice in the DC vendor portal. Okay, so you may see this blank in your payment app because until you approve the payment app, I'm really sorry for the coughing, they don't know what date they're going to submit it. Okay, so if this is blank, that's not a reason to reject the payment application. Just make sure that your vendor adds this in, and this is in their QRG before they run the merge template to submit the pay app. Okay, who's going to sign the invoice from their company, what their title is. These are just convenience fields for the merge template, so they populate. This is you as the PM. Once you approve it, come in here and mark it approved. If you're going to reject it, come in here and mark it rejected. Come in here, you can mark it as in review if you're still dealing with it. Okay, make sure the status is right. Put your name in here once you approve it or reject it. Put any review comments in here. These fields down here are PMOs, and PMO will track the actual invoice that's submitted in the vendor portal against your payment application or the vendor's payment application in the system. Okay, this is just for invoice tracking and reporting purposes. So again, this says invoice because it is the invoice. The rest of it is the pencil copy. Okay, item breakdown. these will be the cost lines out of your contract and any cost lines out of your change orders. So if you had 3 lines in your contract and you've had 4 change orders with 2 lines each, then you're going to have 11 lines here. Okay, that may be what you need. So that's fine. Your vendor is going to put in the total amount completed and pick the retainage percent. Okay, as long as they do those 2 things and get them correct, this is all going to add up correctly, and it's going to all carry over to their payment application. Okay, so you need to review that this is all correct.
Hey, John, can I interrupt you, or should I ask till the end?
No, that's fine.
So I've had this kind of a glitch happen multiple times with multiple vendors where the retainage is clearly 10% there, and I've even played around with it. But then when the PDF it, when you're supposed to print it, there's a glitch and it turns to like 9.99999%, like a lot.
What that means is instead of selecting 10%, they've typed in a value. So over here, you have the option to either do the percentage or you can type in a value. So if they type in a value and that value is a rounding thing, it's not actually 10%.
But I've gone back and played around with the percent. It clearly shows percent there, and I've even changed it to 11% and just to play around with it. And when I turn it back to 10%, the same error shows up. And it's not all the time, but if it happens again, I'll let you know.
Yeah, it's we've seen it before. What it is, you know, if they're typing in a value, it's going to round it to the nearest percentage here, but it's going to carry it out like 30 some decimal places, which sometimes you do see, and that's how it shows up in the merge template, is you'll see a whole bunch of things. So what they need to do is they need to remove it here. Okay, hit save and then refresh and then come back and just use this and change it to percentage, and it'll auto calculate here.
So on
now because of rounding, every once in a while you'll still get it because it'll round up to the next penny or down. So it still may happen, but it's as close as it's going to get, and it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So once you've reviewed all that and it's correct, then you can pass the workflow and go ahead and mark your status and your details and all of that stuff. You can use this financial summary tab to check everything. This is what's going to show you. Basically, it's a snapshot of the finances on everything, what retainage is held, what's been released, total value. This is where you can come check, you know, current payment due. This is where it's going to show up. That's going to be the invoice. Okay. So this is really just for reference. You're not changing anything here, but you're reviewing all of this, and only once all of that is correct and has been dealt with, that's when you should be approving this and then sending the action item over to the vendor saying, run the merge template, create your invoice packet, and upload to the DC vendor portal. Okay. One nuance here, I know we're down to like a minute, so I'm going to go. The attachments in here, this is a pencil copy, not an invoice. There are different document requirements for both. Okay, it's your job as the PM to determine for your pencil copy, in order for you to approve that pencil copy, what attachments need to be attached at that point. Okay, make sure all of that's there. The documents later on that are required for the invoice, have your vendor attach them when they come back in and put their invoice number and their invoice submitted date. Have them put a copy in here at this point, and then they can include them in the merge template. Okay, that's when you would put the CIP and all that stuff in there. Okay, those are not necessarily required for the pencil copy. Certified payrolls are not generally included in a pencil copy, things like that, but they do need to be in the system when they go to run the invoice. Okay, any questions on that? I'm right at 1:30, so I'm happy to stick around if anybody wants to hang out and has more questions or wants to talk about anything, or, you know, I know your time is valuable. If you all need to leave, you know, thank you very much for joining us. I'll have this posted up, and have a great day.
Hey, John. So are we supposed to put a CIP here as well afterwards?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that originally it was designed where you would add the CIP during the whole process, but then there was a clarification that came out from OCFO that they want the CIP invoice date to be the date submitted. So if you know the date submitted and you can put it in the beginning, that's fine. If not, you'll need to add the CIP when the vendor comes back and enters this stuff so that you have the right date on the CIP.
Okay.
You can always go upload it to Pass and then come back and throw a copy in here as well. I know it's sometimes the times just overlap, so that's your discretion. Eventually a copy should be in here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All
Hey,
right,
John.
thank you, John.
Thank you.
John, can I ask another question about share quickly?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to share with the contractor, but my error came up and said it's already in my directory and it won't let me save it.
The directory is where you would add vendors, not share with vendors. So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. So if you're in the directory and you're getting a message that said it's already there, then that person has already been added to the project.
Right.
Okay, so you don't need to do anything because they're already on your project.
Okay, that's what I thought, but it keeps telling me that they're already in here for their contact information. So it won't let me do anything. I was just trying to verify they're in here. So
Oh,
I think past that.
Are they already in the system or are they already on your project?
They're on the project. And I'm
Okay,
just trying to make sure that they can share all the documents.
Well, you have to go in and share all the documents with the share group that you have put them in.
Okay.
That's what up here, each document has the share. When you save and share, you would do it, or you go right to the documents and share them. And if you have added your architect engineer to the project and put them correctly in the architect engineer share group and you want them to see this, then when you share, you would select architect engineer share group and hit share.
Okay.
So this will be available with anybody who's in that share group.
Okay.
Same thing with any of the other ones. So that's where everything you do should be shared with project manager share group every time. And then anybody else, just click the ones that apply.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
John,
Yes.
a question. I know the executed date for the contract is the date when contracting officer signs it.
Correct.
However, some vendors argue on the basis that they want to wait till the PO is issued.
Well, they can argue all they want, but the reality is the contract is executed and the change order when it's signed by the contracting officer.
Yeah, that is true. But
So,
sometimes the PO is issued month later.
I know. Trust me, I've seen it, but that doesn't change the fact that the contract is executed when it's signed by the contracting officer. So they can take that up with contracts and procurement, but it's still that date in the system. They're still under contract at that point.
Okay.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Quick question on PCOs. In the review of PCOs, how do you recommend we track the different comments? So if the PCO arrives in for a project and we want to reach out to the architect to first review it, they'll reach out to their structural engineer. There may be a question that the architect may bring back to DGS that we need to go back to the general contractor to get clarification on. How do you recommend we track all of that communications under action items or under comments? What's the best way?
It's a case-by-case basis because, your interactions with your architect on that PCO are not necessarily things that you want the general contractor to see. So you don't, I can't just say, or, blanket use the comments or whatever. There's also who's using the system and who's not. If their consultants are using the system, it's easy to do action items and things like that. But otherwise, it's just going to be outside the system anyway. You can use action items and just not share the action items with other people, but I think it's a case by case basis.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the other thing you can do is, the architect can send it to you however through a report or whatever, and you can put a reference link in there as to a memo to file where you enter it or something like that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
John, I have one question.
Okay.
So when I do review the pay applications in the system, I go to the PDF file, I open it and markup on it, and then they upload a revised version. Is there a way to go back and look at my markups?
You can go to previous versions.
How
So
do
let me
we
see
do
if I can find one in here, something that's got an attachment. I don't know what has an attachment or what doesn't, so bear with me. And I don't want to mess up anybody's. Let's see, if any of these have attachments. Okay, so over here, you can go to properties on the file, and it'll show you any versions of it, and you can click right on that version, or you can upload a new version of that file. Do you need me to go through that again?
No, thank you. I'll check out on my project now.
Yep, just click this and hit properties, and that'll take you to all the versions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? All right, well, I think we have got everything in here. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. Sorry we ran a couple minutes over, but feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions. And we'll be doing this class again. Just keep in mind, I'm going to send out an invitation in the next couple of days for another Lunch and Learn on December 30th. It is going to be a repeat of this class. So those of you that want to take it a second time are welcome to join us. But if you've taken this one and you aren't going to be here on the 30th or whatever, don't worry. It's just a repeat. We are also going to post the recording of this class up with the rest of the training class recordings. So it's all available. If you have colleagues that are upset that they missed this, they can take the 30th class or go watch the video. So,
John, I have a quick question for you.
Okay.
And this is, in the future, would you be offering different classes that covers different areas of project teams? Because, I mean, you and I have talked offline, and there are some of the tasks, even though we're not supposed to be the ones doing them, but I think it'll be good if since you're the subject matter expert on this software, to educate or train us all so we know exactly what we're looking for and can tell when our vendors or subcontractors or GCs are not really getting it right.
Well, we will be doing future Lunch and Learns. This will continue with different stuff. I know we're using the Lunch and Learns right now, but there are other DGS capital construction Lunch and Learns coming. So we'll be doing project team stuff intermittently. But directly to what you're saying, you know, the QRGs are the best source for you guys to go look at what the general contractor or the architect or whoever is supposed to be doing. That's why we posted them for everybody. So, you know, the vendor use stuff is all right here. If you want to know what the general contractor is supposed to be putting in for submittals or how they're supposed to be doing it, then you come in here and go to creating and submitting submittals and submittal packages for the general contractor. And you can actually see exactly how they're instructed to do it, where they're instructed to do it, and know what their process is so that when you're reviewing it, you know what to look for. So some of them also, if you read the DGS version of that QRG, like perfect example right here, the DGS version for payment applications is reviewing and approving. So it does have some of what to look for and what you should be doing when you're reviewing and approving. So these are designed that so at any time you don't need to go attend classes and take out that time. When you have the availability, you can come in here and you can look at what anybody is supposed to do for their part. Does that help?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And you can always, like I always say, you can always keep reaching out to us at support.